The Lever. Subscriber-supported journalism that holds power accountable. As a Lever Premium subscriber, you'll get to hear exclusive bonus content from this episode and others in your feed. To become a subscriber, go to levernews.com.
From the Lever's reader-supported newsroom, this is Lever Time. I'm Arjun Singh. The biggest box office success of the last 30 years isn't an Oscar winner, it's Ticketmaster. Long the scourge of the music industry, Ticketmaster's imposed fees have become a regular part of the concert-going experience. But what if it wasn't? That's at the heart of a new Department of Justice lawsuit against Ticketmaster and its parent company Live Nation, one of the largest venue owners in the country. The DOJ says that together, Ticketmaster and Live Nation have forced fans into paying way too much to see their favorite band. That's what led Pearl Jam on a mission to Congress in 1994, and more recently, megastars like Taylor Swift have been speaking out against the company and its perceived monopoly. Today on Lever Time, I sit down with a musician and an antitrust expert to discuss the ways Ticketmaster has hurt artists and fans, unpack the lawsuit, and ask whether this will be enough to fix a broken industry. So I am joined today in our virtual studio with two fantastic guests. We're going to be here to be talking about everything Ticketmaster. I'm joined by Greg and Morgan. Morgan, can I start with you and just you want to say hey to the audience and tell them a little bit about yourself?
Hey audience, I'm Morgan Harper. I'm Director of Policy and Advocacy at the American Economic Liberties Project. We're a nonprofit that's trying to break up corporate monopolies all across the economy, and Ticketmaster has been in our crosshairs for quite some time. So happy to be here.
And Greg, what do you want to say to our audience?
Greetings, Lever audience. I'm the drummer of Deerhoof, and I'm very excited to be talking with you. I'm, like everybody, very interested in the topic of Live Nation and Ticketmaster, and it affects bands, or artists directly all the time, anytime we trying to do a tour at all. And so for me, it's I'm really grateful for a chance to talk to people who have a better understanding of the legal and financial side of it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And so let's start with what exactly happened. The Department of Justice files a lawsuit against Ticketmaster, Morgan. But what does that mean? I know Merrick Garland pretty much said, hey, we want to break up Ticketmaster Live Nation. Is that actually what's on the table, and what are the rationale and the reasons they're giving legally that this should happen?
Yeah, so I think it's important to give a little bit of background here. Last week was huge, and so we're gonna dive into that. But complaints about Ticketmaster Live Nation have been going on for some time, like Greg was alluding to in his introduction. Is this company has been engaging in what a lot of folks consider to be monopolistic behavior, bullying everybody in the industry, from artists, fans, venue owners, and when we first got involved, it was to make the point that this merger combining Live Nation and Ticketmaster never should have happened in the first place. And it was approved in 2010. And so it was so amazing to see Attorney General Merrick Garland, who I don't think is a guy who's known for his emotive rhetoric necessarily, getting up there at a podium, right? I think that's fair to say. With all love, I say that. But get up there and be like, we've got to break them up. And here's why. And if you do spend the time to go through the pretty long complaint, I bet, Greg, you could probably write this complaint yourself, because it's really just laying out the lived experiences of so many people in the industry. What are they saying? What have we heard from people in our Break Up Ticketmaster coalition? That Live Nation Ticketmaster controls about 80% of the primary ticketing market. That is a large percentage of the primary ticketing market. And just to distinguish that from, the secondary market, that they are now controlling concert promotion. If you want to go on tour and you want to make some money in doing that, then you likely are trying to play by Live Nation, Ticketmaster's rules because they dominate a lot of that space, that they've gobbled up the venue market. So now, by some of our estimates, I think the number in the complaint is they're controlling like 60% of the largest venues nationwide, amphitheaters where a lot of tours want to stop to be able to access their audiences, in addition to the artist management business line that they control. And then this whole other category of sponsorship and advertising. And what the Department of Justice is alleging is that though Ticketmaster, the ticketing platform, gets a lot of attention, that it's really the combination of these different business lines and how Live Nation, Ticketmaster can leverage their power in those business lines that makes them an impenetrable force and a real monopoly that is engaged in anti-competitive, illegal conduct and needs to be broken up.
You had a number in there, 80% of market share. I might be wrong, but isn't 40% of market share considered like a monopoly? So this would be double what is legally supposed to even be a monopoly by that standard, right?
Yeah, I mean, market share, how much market share is too much market share? There's a lot of factors that go into play to determine when you're veering into the monopolistic conduct. But you are absolutely right that 80% is a very, very, very high number of market share. And so, I think sometimes the argument, I just saw something earlier today, is like, well, but couldn't this just be that you're better than everybody else? People just really love Ticketmaster and they're choosing Ticketmaster. And, we wouldn't want to punish companies for just being better. But no, I mean, once you're getting to 80% market share for something like ticketing, that is a pretty broad type of product. And again, in combination with all these other business lines in the same industry, that's where you it does raise a certain level of suspicion. And like the DOJ laid out here, I mean, it is this combination of relationships, but leading with that primary ticketing market share of 80% that allows Live Nation to have so much power and exercise it over the rest of the market.
Journalistically, I would like to say I've never met anyone who loves Ticketmaster yet, but if you're in the audience and you love Ticketmaster, write us an email, write me an email and let me know.
I'd in the next episode, right?
Yeah, I'd love to meet that person because I just haven't encountered them yet. But Greg, what is it like for you as a musician? You've been playing music for more than 20 years. You've done it in a couple different bands. So for you, like, how do you just feel about Ticketmaster? Is it like, do they exert that much control over your day-to-day life as a musician?
Yeah, I mean, my band Deer was actually older. It's 30 years old. In any case, the level of consolidation that has ramped up and made Ticketmaster, the target of so much, mostly fan ire, but also, famously musicians' ire as well. I guess it would, the whole conflict with Pearl Jam was happening around the same time that my band started. So it's sort of like my band goes from the beginning of this whole narrative.
Yeah, what was the deal with Pearl Jam and Ticketmaster? Because I have been seeing like old school pictures of Eddie Vedder back in the day in Congress. Like, so what were they dealing with back then?
I think there were many things. This was before any merger had occurred. And I think they found even then that it seemed suspicious that Ticketmaster appeared to be the only option. When you're getting up to that, like, really mainstream, famous kind of level as an artist, you didn't have any choice. You almost definitely had to sell your tickets through Ticketmaster and just shut up, in reference to whatever surcharges they decided to add. And Pearl Jam made the attempt to set up an entire U.S. tour without visiting any venue that sold their ticket through Ticketmaster. So they ended up in a whole bunch of like super random small towns that don't usually see Pearl Jam arriving.
Morgan, hearing that anecdote about basically the impossibility of being able to go on a national tour without having to use Ticketmaster, that in and of itself, this is pre-Live Nation merger. But does that fall under like an anti-competitive tactic? Is that an example of Ticketmaster being a monopoly? And what are some of the other ways that in your research into them, you've seen them really exert what we would consider like illegal monopoly behavior?
Well, it is a great point because, like we were talking about, what was Ticketmaster's path to that 80% market share? And Greg's absolutely right. I mean, they were dominating ticketing long before the Live Nation merger. They acquired this company called Ticketron that allowed them to, I don't know if, Greg, you ever dealt with them.
Oh, yeah, of course. Ticketron. That was the 80s one.
Yeah, that was yeah. So this was like a long journey to get to that dominance of ticketing. But they're able to still exert a lot of influence over venues, for example, even before the merger. If you want to get access to our ticketing platform, then you need to make sure that you're working with us all the time and creating some of these exclusive contracts. I mean, exclusive contracts are they're not always anti-competitive, but they are something that can be seen as anti-competitive depending on how they're deployed. And so, they were so dominant that was really what spurred the merger. Is Live Nation was thinking of developing their own ticketing, because they also were getting sick of the fees. It's like, what is this? We don't even know how much things cost, because when you're a middleman, you can just make up how much things are costing, and let somebody know what the price is that they're just going to have to take. And so it was that fear of actually having a real competitor on a different ticketing platform that Live Nation would be able to control with their venues that led Ticketmaster to say, no. Let's just pause this. We don't need to be enemies. We can be friends together and make as much money as possible. And so, that's what led to the merger and then the combination of these different business lines like we've already discussed. I do have to say, real props to Pearl Jam, because I think their journey does indicate a couple of things. One, the power of strong advocacy to an extent that they really put themselves out there to educate a lot of folks, including Congress, about what was going on in the market, but then the limitations of a monopolist and their resources. And so, what we're seeing now is that there's just been, I think, such a level of consolidation across all these different business lines that I wish Pearl Jam could be out there talking, based on everything that's going on right now, because they would have a lot more people who understood what they were saying. Maybe not as many people that have the bravery to speak out about it. But certainly the political conditions around them have changed quite a bit. And that's what makes us optimistic about where we might head from here after this DOJ lawsuit got filed.
Say, you're like, F Ticketmaster, I don't want to use them at all. Are you able to just buy a ticket? Like back in the day, you used to be able to just drive to the venue, wait at the will call box or the box office and get a ticket. But is that possible right now? I feel like there have been instances where I've been to venues where they say you have to buy through Ticketmaster, or you get to the box office and they still charge you a Ticketmaster fee. Greg, is that something you've noticed? And then Morgan, I'd love to hear from you if there's that's a more widespread thing, or maybe that's just been a bad experience of mine.
There is obviously an irony here, because this company is making so much profit while venue staff wages have stagnated, during that same time period, the past couple decades. And while the artist's income has very obviously decreased during that time, dramatically decreased, what is actually the service, the quote-unquote service that something like Ticketmaster even provides? And I agree with you, Morgan. It starts to make a lot more sense in 2024 than it did in the peak of Pearl Jam's fame when they were speaking about it. Now it's considered common knowledge that mega corporations are in the business of consolidation, which is a very painless sounding technical term that really means their business model is the crushing of small business, either by putting it out of business or by buying it. Now, to your question, Arjun, the venues we play, we avoid Live Nation venues. Once in a while, we can't avoid it for the simple reason that they have purchased or put out of business so many venues across this country that if we want to play in a certain town, there's no choice. The only venue that's the appropriate size for our audience is a Live Nation venue. And it's like, we do sound check, doors open in an hour. Where should we go eat? Would you rather go to, a mom and pop restaurant that has a great reputation that's near the venue? Or would you rather drive through Burger King? Going to a Live Nation venue that uses Ticketmaster, really either one, is the equivalent of going to Burger King. It's a necessarily depersonalized experience where the story you just told is the case. You can't even go up to a box office window and interact with a human being to buy a physical ticket. Everything is done online.
Well, I guess what I'm wondering, though, is like, if you don't want to eat at Burger King, you don't have to, there are, I of course want to acknowledge there are food deserts. There are places where fast food is the only form of food. I think that's kind of getting to what I'm about to ask right now. But, take a place, I live in Washington, D.C. I don't necessarily have to eat at Burger King, but if I want to go see music, I feel like I have to use Ticketmaster, and even more because they do like promotional deals with different artists, right, Morgan? Like, how has Ticketmaster and Live Nation kind of made it impossible for people to not use them? And is that even a fair assessment of what we're seeing?
I think it's a very fair assessment. I mean, I did an interview last week after the case dropped, the lawsuit dropped, and for local TV. I live in Columbus, Ohio. And the reporter did a great job. I mean, first of all, shout out all local media. Love you forever. But this reporter, who did not know anything about the topic area, just kind of put together a really good mix of voices. And so in addition to interviewing me, also talked to a local venue owner called Ace of Cups in Columbus, Ohio.
We played there.
And this is a venue. You've played there before?
Yeah. Totally.
Amazing. Okay. Yeah. So the owner of that, who's also a musician himself, I believe, Greg.
Yeah.
He participated in this piece, and he's like, look, this is one of the venues. They don't use Ticketmaster. They still allow you to just show up and buy a ticket. But he said, it's really hard because if you're trying to get, a wide variety of artists, so many are just constrained in the type of deal that they can make with you as an independent venue. And that gets at something, Greg had said, where you're having players in the market that are losing their agency to strike their own deals. There are these conflicts of interest and the walled garden of Live Nation Ticketmaster. That's when it starts to sound a lot more like a monopoly. Because the reality now is, Ace of Cups is a great venue. It's a small venue. If you're trying to get to that next level, then that's where Live Nation does have a lot more control and ownership over venues. The complaint that was filed also is talking about how they're gobbling up regional promoters and acquiring regional promoters that might be presenting a real challenge, which, makes a lot of sense. It's like, okay, maybe you're starting a company. You're not looking to dominate the global live events industry. You're just wanting to make a great promotion company for folks who want to get all throughout the Deep South and the best venues throughout the Deep South. Great business idea. But Live Nation, who does appear to want to dominate the entire global live events market, and especially in the United States, can't trust any source of competition. So they're going to try to acquire you and use that Ticketmaster ticketing platform to be able to intimidate other companies, other venues from ever accepting anything but Ticketmaster, because they're terrified of being shut out of the entire ecosystem and potentially losing other tours that will make them a lot of money. So it's all, I mean, I hate to kind of, beat a dead horse, so to speak, but it is just, again, these conflicts of interest, the different control in the business lines that really allows them to make it a take it or leave it situation for consumers, for artists, and for venue owners. And that's why a Pearl Jam, they tried to essentially recreate the ecosystem, but you can't recreate that many different components that it takes to pull off a successful national tour.
Greg, do you feel optimistic about what the potential breakup of Live Nation and Ticketmaster could do for you as a smaller musician traveling around?
Well, I may seem small, on the bottom line of someone's ledger sheet, but, I'm actually, 6'2". It's hard to tell, That is a big question. That before I want to answer it, I just want to speak to a couple kind of ironies that come up for me in some of what you just said, Morgan. One is that Live Nation's own defense, which they have eloquently written and posted upon their website, seems to me to talk out of both sides of one's mouth, in which they both deny that they are a monopoly, and their telling of the numbers and percentages obviously yield some different result than the ones that we're throwing around. And then at the same time, they kind of defend the concept of the monopoly on the grounds that you guys just described, which is that it's so convenient for everyone because it's one-stop shopping, and everybody knows that if you want to get a ticket to your favorite artist's show, you just go to Ticketmaster. It's basically like going to Google or something. It's considered
another monopoly.
Well, yeah, exactly. Thank you. And which brings me to what I think an even bigger irony. When we're talking about the merger happening in 2010, we're literally talking about the Obama first term, just after financiers crashed the world economy and were bailed out by the same administration whose antitrust person decided it wasn't a big deal for this merger to occur. And those bailouts occurred utilizing the following philosophy: they are too big to fail. And you're thinking to yourself, if this government or this society had any sense at all in the way it was designed, you would not be deliberately creating more too big to fail megacorporations. Particularly, we keep talking about consolidation and profit and stuff, but let's be honest, neither Live Nation nor Ticketmaster are music companies in any sense of the word. They are finance companies. And the reason that 2008 crash even happened was the over-leveraging of our economy in the world of Wall Street. So your actual question, my sense is that this did happen because of Taylor Swift fans, disgruntled Taylor Swift fans. And the coverage that's been happening in the past week, particularly in the most mainstream news outlets, has tended to focus on Swifties as, somewhere in the headline or in the first paragraph, which both makes light of the topic, in my opinion, and ignores all of the harm that not only Live Nation and Ticketmaster have been doing to the music industry, but also leaves out the harm, that happens to venues, that happens to staff, that happens to the artists themselves. The proposed solution would seem to be the website wasn't convenient enough. I want greater convenience. What we need is a larger corporation with a better IT department or something that doesn't let their website crash. Or, put another way, it seems to give the message that where Live Nation Ticketmaster screwed up this time was that they allowed the commerce of too large of a megastar to be interrupted. Nothing to do with any Deerhoof or any band on my level. The only reason that it's getting into the news, or I suspect, is because the commerce of a megastar was momentarily inconvenienced. And that was enough for 100,000 write-in, letters of complaint. I am not actually, and I have so much respect for you, Morgan, and everything that you've said, and the long-term fight against monopolies that are doing things like crash the world economy and making us all poor. But, I would have to ask, when's the last time the DOJ actually broke up a monopoly? I have some vague, nebulous, cloudy memory of something with Microsoft about 30-some years ago or something like that. Are they? I have a perhaps cynical.
This isn't your average drummer here. He's got a pretty strong understanding of the history of antitrust enforcement.
Going back to the Microsoft Netscape lawsuit.
Suspicion, even just as a drummer, that what might end up happening is that when I think of a corporation as large as Live Nation and Ticketmaster, I'm suspecting that maybe they have a legal team. And this legal team may be experts at the following: tying this up for years in the courts. So everybody gets fired up right now in an election season. It may seem like a virtue signaling attempt, not necessarily on Merrick Garland's part, but possibly on the part of the Biden administration, as his numbers are tanking, particularly with young people. My prediction is, and we can have another podcast in 9 years when the suit is done. My prediction is that they will not be broken up. They will be slapped with a insignificant fine that will barely even be noticeable in their bottom line, and that they may be mandated to offer some kind of weird vouchers to a few aggrieved Swift fans. Like you get $5 off the next time Taylor Swift goes on tour or something like that.
Well, I understand. I see the optics of there, but I will say at the same time, a lot of what I've heard about antitrust in the past couple of years, people have said it feels like a sea change. We were both at the Anti-Monopoly Summit. We had Rohit Chopra from the CFPB. He was talking about caps on junk fees, possibly reforming credit card points. Lena Khan saying not to walk in fear. She's going and suing Amazon. I wonder if there is some room for optimism. Morgan, you yourself used to work at the CFPB at one point. So, hearing from what Greg said, how do you see this?
Well, I completely understand the cynicism. And Greg, I respect that. I do want to make a little wager now.
Okay.
Next show.
$2.
I know, I was like, what's $5 getting you at a ticket at a Taylor Swift concert? Like access to the bathroom, maybe? Exactly. I don't even know. But anyway.
Code check.
But no, code check if we're lucky, yeah. No, I am optimistic. And a couple of responses, actually, because Greg laid out a lot of things, and much of it I agree with, except for the cynicism.
Okay. Thank you.
It is important to pay attention to the finance and the financiering of Live Nation Ticketmaster. One of the terms that was put in the complaint that we all need to continue to pay attention to is this adjusted operating income, adjusted operating margin. This is the bucket of money that Live Nation Ticketmaster is making that you don't really know what that means, but it appears that that's connected to this pool where they kind of get to skim everything off the top because they're the only ones with full information about all these market areas. And then they let the friendly artists know, oh, you thought that was a really great tour where you made a lot of money. Well, actually, it turns out that was only big pot of money minus X, and then we get to Y, and Y is just so, so sorry, deal with it. This is what we've got left. So that's really important. It is a lot of this money moving around, because we're going to hear a lot, I think, in the coming months about Ticketmaster. They're already starting to say, this is just a low margin business, ticketing. We barely make any money off of the ticketing business.
Totally.
Pay attention. Because when you look at the sponsorship, the advertising, that they have absolute control over who gets to advertise at their venues, at their tours, the DOJ is alleging that those margins are upwards of 60%. In competitive industries, you don't see margins of 60%. That is a very, very high margin. So anyway, getting to the historic nature of the case, it's true. The DOJ has not broken up a company in quite some time. Microsoft actually settled. That was another historic antitrust case, but settled in such a way that forced Microsoft to open up their platforms. And many would argue, and we as an organization do, ushered in the age of the internet. Now, the age of the internet has not landed us in the best of places, with big tech allowed to just flourish, but...
I mean, we get to speak on the podcast, so...
It was worth it for that.
It was worth it. We got the lever. Great. But it did allow that innovation to occur. Now, the last real breakup was with AT&T, with telecom, forcing all of these bells to break up. that was several years ago, several decades ago. And so it has been a while. So this is a huge deal that the DOJ brought this case. The reason that I'm optimistic, though, is because there is different leadership, like Arjun was referencing, some of whom, spoke at the recent anti-monopoly summit that we hosted. Jonathan Cantor is in charge of the Department of Justice Antitrust Division. I would be highly, highly surprised and disappointed if we see any kind of settlement coming out of this. I just don't see it happening based on the facts that the DOJ's laid out in this 100+ page complaint and the track record that Live Nation Ticketmaster has. And here's the other thing that's relevant. The merger was approved using a whole different body of law. That was a Clayton Act case that's really about assessing whether or not a merger should go through. They brought this under Sherman Act, Section 2, another very old law in U.S. history that gets at monopolization conduct. So it's a totally different ball game here. And I don't think that they would have brought this type of case if they didn't feel like they were really in it to win it. And they've been taking a lot of other big, high-profile cases to trial, like against Google Search, for example, that we're waiting to see how the judge will rule there. And so what the impacts of this will be, of course, DOJ would need to win for there to be a real impact. So hopefully that happens. But if they are able to convince a court, and this will be tried in the Southern District of New York with a new Biden appointee judge, so a friendly judge, because it reflects kind of the priorities of this administration. I think we're going to see changes for consumers as fans, for artists, for venue owners, and hopefully, for concert promoters as well, in the sense of this. Take, for example, what we saw with Taylor Swift's tour, just getting back, because that's one of the most famous tours going on right now. You have Americans that are flying to Europe to go to see her shows there because they're cheaper. It's cheaper to pay for an airfare to get to Europe and pay for a hotel because the tickets are so much cheaper. Why is that? Live Nation's still operating there. There's Ticketmaster, but they don't have as much venue ownership, and they also don't have the ability to do these exclusive contracts with the venues that don't allow the venues to shop around for which ticketing platform they want to use. What does competition do? It often can lower prices. It gives the venue owner more agency to decide not only what's the lowest price product, what's the best quality product too, that they want their customers to be dealing with.
Well, Greg, does that put some of your cynicism at bay?
Yes,
and I'm going to get to one of Greg's concerts for free, because he'll see.
Morgan, I really, really appreciate you going into so much detail and addressing what I'm saying. And I agree with you. I certainly hope that the DOJ wins. My concern, however, is that even a victory, we will not completely change the nature of the music industry or the nature of the music economy. It will not restructure it. It will simply make it more competitive, which is fine. But what I was speaking to, these questions of national chains, okay, Burger King isn't a monopoly. I still don't, even if they broke up McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's, I still don't want to go to any of them. And I'm not going to want to use Ticketmaster, even if they become a smaller market share and are now competing with Next Ticket or whatever, whatever their competitors are. They're all corny and they're all crooks. A person that behaves properly under a system that rewards financiers for being rich and pays rich people for being rich and punishes poor people for being poor doesn't change just because they're one iota more regulated. And I'm sort of curious how Biden's, focus a few months ago on junk fees and stuff like that. It is obviously a very similar topic. And it was like airlines and stuff. To me, it struck me at the time as a very minor slap on the wrist. I would like something to fundamentally change. For me, it's obvious what to do. You nationalize it. And I agree with you about Europe. A reason it's cheaper to get that same ticket in Europe is because those governments are stronger against monopolies. And their economies don't rely as much on the success of, or they aren't propped up to the degree the U.S.'s economy is propped up on monopolies on purpose, deliberately.
Well, I would say, how I would see the junk fees connecting to this and kind of think about that is
Yeah.
First of all, Federal Trade Commission has proposed a rule to ban junk fees across the economy. So it's not just mentioned in speeches.
Amazing.
That would potentially become law, which would be great.
Okay, good.
But it also serves to educate the public about what is going on in our economy. I think for a lot of us, we were just showing up and paying these fees that were popping up. But, after a couple of years of learning about, wait a second, they're in hotels, they're in rental, they're in food, like what are all these fees? Now, fast forward to a DOJ case that is laying out 7 different types of fees that are put on top of tickets. Well, now most people that pay attention to any sort of media understand that's junk. That's big corporations just ripping me off. I don't like that. And I kind of like what DOJ is doing. So, it is connected there. The other thing I would say is I completely agree with you to the extent that even if Live Nation Ticketmaster is found liable, if the remedy here somehow just calls for those behavioral remedies that are sort of like, please just do a little bit we'll monitor. It's very difficult. It's
Right.
very difficult to monitor a giant. I mean, DOJ tried to do that in 2010. They negotiated a consent decree with some of those terms that Live Nation just blew through because they have immense financial resources. Instantly. But that's the beauty of antitrust remedies is when you impose structural ones.
True.
It takes away a lot of that work on the other side of it. If Live Nation Ticketmaster is forced to divest, which is what our organization is recommending, divest all the business lines, Live Nation Ticketmaster is banned from entering into exclusive agreements with venues and also has to open up its host software platform. That's what we think will be the beginning of injecting some competition. And then you have to continue, you have to see how the market develops. But that would be, I think you agree, Greg, like a whole new world based on where we've been for the last 30 years if they are truly barred from owning all of these business lines and can't introduce any exclusive or impose any exclusive agreements on other market players.
It legitimizes the existence of a completely pointless middleman that didn't used to exist. That's what I think. And
it eliminates the existence, actually, because
Yeah.
they won't be able to be a middleman anymore because they're only going to be doing one of those things. They'd have to choose their own live events adventure.
But remember, that merger took place after Eddie Vedder's issue with it. And that had nothing to do with breaking up that conflict of interest. It was just, he didn't like that Ticketmaster existed in the first place. He didn't like the entity itself, the principle. And I hear you. And I'm also, suspensefully waiting, in optimism that this will produce a really beneficial and healthy change for the people, the non-financiers, the people who actually make or host or love music. I feel that I still have a sneaking suspicion about is it legitimizes the existence of the financialization of, okay, yes, maybe there'll be more competitors, but we see things like artists who have their entire back catalog, the publishing rights, bought up by some incredibly rich investor. We see Bandcamp being bought up by a billionaire company and immediately dumping it to some other multi-million-dollar company. Even in the lifespan of my own band, I've seen the music industry become a world of finance in which music is only the bait, it's the loss leader. It's just the sparkly thing that gets people interested in your hedge fund, basically.
I completely agree. And Greg, I just want to say, I think you tapped into the larger fight that those of us who do believe in freedom, really, to have some control over your lives, to believe in creating and looking after your community. The fight that we're up against is this financialization of the economy and bringing more autonomy to more actors in the economy. And so I don't at all want to oversell what the Live Nation Ticketmaster lawsuit will do to get us to the end of that fight. But I do think it is one step along the way. Streaming, for example, huge. The fact that so many artists need to tour in order to earn any sort of money, very problematic. And but what we're working towards, I think, and this came up a little bit at the summit of I don't know, Arjun, if you were there the whole time, but the closing remarks we had from Senator Chris Murphy was talking a little bit about how, the economy has become this race to the bottom, that, does lead to this place of desperation. You do think, even in taking a whole nother industry context, tech, your mindset is sell, get acquired, because you want the quick buck and get out. We're not, based on how the economy is structured, we're not always attracting creatives, builders, people who want to really lead institutions. Everybody's looking for the quick buck because of the conditions that have been created. And if we do this right, then perhaps we can start to reorient the economy to reward folks who do want to take on that leadership role and really try to innovate and create value. That is not going to be done in a year, in 2 years. It took us actually 40 years of a philosophy that got us into this mess. And let's see how long it'll take us to get it out of it. But I do think we're on our way, and working together, we'll get closer.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Lever Time. This episode was produced by me with help from Nick Campbell and editing support from Lucy Dean Stockton and Joel Warner. Our theme music was composed by Nick Campbell. We'll be back later this week with another episode of Lever Time.